Hello, I'm going to be walking you through Logic Pro X in this video. Logic is a paid program on the Apple App Store, and its interface resembles the GarageBand interface, so if you've used GarageBand, it'll look familiar to you. But Logic Pro is significantly more in depth, and so I hope this video clarifies how to navigate the project menu. As for the music in the back, that is my own music. I don't sell it or anything like that. I'm just putting it in there to show you that I've made things in Logic, and these are the kind of sounds you can achieve when you navigate the project menu a little bit. So like GarageBand, when you start a project, there's several options. There's software instrument, which is what we're going to end up choosing. That's a MIDI controlled instrument. Then there's audio, guitar, and bass. Those require external interfaces to use, meaning it's a separate piece of equipment that you'd have to buy to record into Logic. The same thing with external MIDI. Again, you can use MIDI instruments native to Logic. This is just in case you want to use your own MIDI controller. And then there's drummer, so you can select a particular style and the drummer will play along with your track. For the sake of this video, I'm going to choose the software instrument and show you how to navigate some of the tools when you select that feature on Logic Pro X. So when you open a project, it automatically opens with this MIDI keyboard. It's Command K to open and close it. I've become lost many times and restarted projects because I didn't know that command, but that's there for you. So I'm going to do a survey of the tools along the top of the project so you know how to navigate the menu a little better. So this first one here is the library, and these are a collection of software instruments native to Logic. They're all MIDI controlled. You don't need an external MIDI. You can control them with your keyboard. There's a lot of options. It's a lot of fun instruments to toy around with. Next is the inspector. So this displays info concerning the highlighted instrument. So if you have an instrument, you'll see this menu here. You can add audio effects. Buses are a type of send. Next would be the quick help button. So to explain what I just said about buses, in case you don't understand that, this is the perfect button for you. You keep this on and you highlight any of the things you're doing in Logic, and it'll give you a brief survey of how they work. Next is the toolbar. So this is a bunch of useful tools for if you're just quick editing. There's things like scissors to allow you to trim, stuff like that. Next is smart controls. So this opens a modification menu for any highlighted instrument, meaning that if you have a synth, there's a lot of synths in Logic, you can modify the characteristics and sound qualities of that synth to match how you want it to sound. Next is the mixer. So this opens an individual track mixer and a master track. The master track is the mixer for the entire project. The individual is obviously for the individual track. Next is the editor. So this displays info for a MIDI region. If you have MIDI recorded, and it displays audio information for a recorded audio from a physical instrument. It allows you to edit from the bottom of the menu. So you can cut, trim, and manipulate MIDI notes if you'd like. Next is track info, bar, beat, tempo, time signature, and key. I'd recommend starting by choosing each of these before you go. It's a nice heuristic for beginning a project. You don't have to if you don't want to, and you can always manipulate them later on. The replace button, I never use it personally, but it replaces a pre-existing region when recording. The tuner is exactly what it sounds like. When you're recording externally, you can tune your instrument, guitar, bass for example. Next is solo, so this mutes all the other tracks and solos a particular instrument that you have highlighted. It's handy if you're trying to manipulate the sound quality of a particular instrument. Next is the count in and metronome. These are rather self-explanatory. Count in before the project and metronome for while you're recording. The list editor. So this manipulates individual MIDI notes from a single menu. So you can choose where they land, snap them to a grid, their velocity, etc. Notepad. It's a notepad. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you can choose particular segments of the project you'd like to add a note. Here's the loop browser. So this allows you to browse loops both native to Logic and user controlled. There's hundreds of available loops offered by Logic. Blue loops are recorded sounds and therefore only modifiable in tempo. Green are MIDI controlled, so you can manipulate where they land. And finally there's the browser, and that allows you to select audio files from your desktop and drag them into your project. So when you're starting out, I'd highly suggest choosing a master track template unless you know how to fiddle with EQ and effects like compressors or multipressors already. If you don't, I would choose a master track template. So this is the menu here, it's on the right, that's the master track, and I would go to factory, and then you select from any of those options. You can go through them and see how each of them sounds. So here, for example, I chose hip hop, and this is what the menu looks like, and I'll go through each one of these effects. So there's the compressor, and a compressor limits dynamic range or the softest and loudest sounds. For example, this allows you to have quieter portions in a song without making the listener go deaf when the track gets louder. There's the channel EQ. This is for accentuating particular frequencies in a track. There are times where a bass may have too much low end or something like that. It's muddying the mix. That's how you manipulate it. The multipressor is basically localized compression, but you can see this as the combination of a compressor and a channel EQ. You choose to compress particular frequency ranges. Then finally there's the limiter, and that creates a ceiling for audio so it doesn't exceed a certain decibel value. When something's in the red underneath the panning knob there, that means that it's above, it's got a positive decibel value, it's a little too loud, and the limiter can cut that down. So then we're going to go to editing a MIDI recording. So I would record a couple bars of something, for example what I have on the screen here. And this is the menu you'll see at the bottom of the screen. So now I'm going to go over what these settings on the left mean. There's time quantize, and this allows you to arrange the location of highlighted MIDI notes. So you can select individual notes, or you can highlight them by dragging your cursor over them. And what you can do is if they're not in the time that you want, you can go to the left and you can choose a particular subdivision that you want the notes to be snapped to. So there's eighth notes, and then there's also more complicated ones like the triplets and the quintuplets for you to choose from. Next is scale quantize, which is very similar, but what it does is it corresponds to where the notes land with respect to a scale. So you can highlight them or select them, you choose a key, and then you can choose a scale. And what Logic will do is it'll snap them to the scale if there are particular notes that are off scale or off key or something like that. This is fun to play around with if you don't know a lot about proper music theory. I know little to nothing about proper music theory, so I use this as a crutch. Finally, there's velocity, and velocity will change the intensity of a particular note. So what I'll demonstrate here is you click on a note and you can drag to particular intensities. It'll become darker and more red if you are of a higher intensity, and green and bluish if you go to a lower intensity. It's just how hard the note's being played. But with that is basically what you need to navigate Logic to a very simple degree. Like I said, I would keep the quick help menu on if you're lost with anything. I could never cover all of the options that you have with Logic Pro X. There's a lot to cover. So what I would do is, with what I've just shown you, is I would play around in the menu and see what you can come up with. But other than that, that's all you need to know to basically get started and understand what those symbols mean.